Hey everybody, happy Monday evening. Hope you all are doing okay out there. We are almost to spring break, which hopefully will be a nice bit of rest, at least from the school stuff. I know we all have a lot of other stuff going on, but at least you don't have to worry about this for a little while. So welcome to the new module. Got some new stuff to do this time. We're kind of transitioning into the second half of the class, so you'll notice a couple of changes to the structure. And I just want to kind of go through the activities to introduce them today, as we usually do. And then Friday, we'll go over the two chemistry activities in more detail. The other stuff I think you can do on your own just fine. And then when we come back from spring break, we'll talk about some of the other stuff. So the article reports are done. You did your 4 article reports. They were great, and I will be taking a look at your latest ones. We're now going to transition to looking at original scientific research. That's going to be a big focus of the class for the rest of the semester. It's important to be, as an educated person, to get away from those kind of interpreted things that you find online and to really know where to go for accurate, tested information that isn't just somebody's idea of what they like and what they should put on the internet. So that's what we're going to be working on, starting with this module and then kind of accelerating into the next couple and finishing up with the final project. All right, so let's take a look at what you're going to be doing this time. So we're going to talk a little bit more about just some basic chemical concepts, chemical equations and reactions, and moles. And then we're going to start looking at this, getting information from scientific papers. So for those of you who've done some stuff with chemical equations and reactions and that sort of thing, what we're doing here should be fairly simple to you. If you've never seen it before, we're just doing a basic introduction so we know how these things work. So for the activities, as usual, I don't know how to organize this all the time. They are the activities, I guess, they go in the activities section, but they're also assignments because you have to turn them in. So they're also in the assignments section. So I guess the only thing that's in the activities section here that's not in the other one is this couple guides on reading scientific papers. So if you could open these links up and just read through them. They're both aimed at non-scientists, or at least non-experts in the field. And when we talk about reading scientific papers, really, we're all non-experts because we're not reading chemistry papers in a subfield that I'm a particular expert on. We're reading general science papers from lots of different areas written for people in those areas, and we're trying to make sense out of what can be daunting sometimes. So we're going to work on that together, but these links give you some good strategies to do that. So read those through. If you've never dealt with scientific papers or reports of research before, this is a good introduction to what those papers are all about. And then next module, we'll get into some of them on our own, and your assignments will be more about finding those papers and interpreting those papers in order to prepare you for the final project. All right, so you can do those. So then we'll take a look at these couple activities. These are similar to what you've done before, where you're given some information at the beginning, and then you're asked some fairly simple questions about them. But the idea is that by the time you get down to the bottom, you're actually interpreting them and making up some rules that make sense. And just like the other ones, I'm not grading these really closely on did you get every question right? It's more, can you learn this stuff? And can you use these to learn this information? And I encourage you to go through them as with the other ones without looking up other references, just trying to work your way through the activity as it is. So you get some information about some elephants. How many trunks are in a dozen elephants? So with the information up here, that the beginning couple things should be pretty straightforward and pretty easy to answer. And then as it gets more complicated, it gets a little bit harder, and you have to think more about what's going on there. So on this particular activity, I have I've crossed some things out. Again, we don't want to get too deep into the math of how to calculate these because we're not going to be using that. So the goal here is not to be able to calculate specifically the numbers of moles and grams and things like that. You may have done that in a previous class. I don't know. We're not going to do that. What we want to be able to do is this last question. This is really the key, and these are the types of questions that you'll see on the quiz. Can you compare these things and make some sense out of them? And I'm not going through the whole thing right now, but on Friday, I will go through and really teach more about what's going on here. So definitely stay tuned for that. I'm guessing with a 3-week module, most of you are not getting everything done between now and Friday. So you can definitely do the other stuff, but hold off on these 2 activities, the moles and then the chemical equations, until we can go through it together on Friday. So same deal here. We're going to look at some chemical equations and try to piece some or interpret some data out of them first, and then be able to actually do the skill where we, at the end here, actually do this equation balancing. And if you haven't done that before, it'll be fine. I will again take you through it on Friday. There's one I forgot to cross out here. This read the assigned pages, because again, it comes from a textbook. We saw that before. You can ignore that. All right, so lab this week. You've got 2 things to do for lab. They're all virtual. We're going to get back into the kit next time. I'm excited about the next one. I think it's going to be fun. It uses those little beads that you saw in there. If you haven't taken those out and played with them yet, they're UV active. So if you take them out in the sun or something, you'll see some stuff happen. So we're going to do a neat experiment with those next time. But this time, it's a virtual lab. And it's about chemical reactions. And it really kind of makes me sad that we have to do this one as a virtual lab, because it's always a fun one to do in lab. You get to light stuff on fire and mix things and whatever. But, what are we going to do? It is what it is. So luckily, I think you guys have gotten to do some good experiments from your at-home ones, and I'm excited to continue looking at the ones that you turned in last week. They've looked good so far. This one, you're just kind of going through as though we were doing it in lab, but there is a playlist on YouTube of people doing these experiments at Harper for you. I think some of them are not from Harper. And then you can actually see the results there. And then there are some pictures as well to look at. So just kind of work your way through these as though you were doing it in a lab. Write down your observations in your notebook as though you were doing it in lab. But you're not doing it in lab. You're watching videos. So that should work out okay. And then at the end, you get to practice doing some more equation balancing. So a lot of the reactions that you saw in this, and then there are some extra ones as well, you can practice balancing those. So after we get those skills on Friday, hopefully that will make plenty of sense and will be a good way for you to practice that skill before the quiz. All right, the other lab thing you're doing is proposing your next experiment. So you did your second experiment over this past couple of weeks, and now it's time for the third one. There will be 2 more, the third one and the fourth one. So you can propose a new experiment, and then again, we'll carry that out in the next module and then repeat at the very end. So that's all that is. Now this last thing, this finding credible sources activity, we're going to talk about different types of sources as related to the final project. But because we're focusing more on scientific papers going forward, this one doesn't actually necessarily apply to scientific papers, but it just says in general what kinds of sources are reliable and what kinds aren't. And there are some activities to investigate one of these different ideas and try to find some sources and use this thing called the CRAP test to figure out if those sources are reliable or not. So you may have done something like this in a library activity or in another class in the past. We will talk about this more when we talk about reading scientific papers in a week, I guess in 2 weeks because of spring break. So we'll go through that. Most of this is probably stuff you've heard before, but I want to make sure that we all know what's going on here, that we're getting our information from reliable places. When we do the final project, we're actually going to do a mix. The final project's going to be a mix of reliable and unreliable sources on purpose, finding unreliable sources and thinking about why or how we can prove that they're not really reliable. So, so in order to do that, we need to know what good sources look like so that we can have that comparison. So that's the other thing to do for this module. So everything should be, I think, fairly simple. You'll probably have the most trouble with the these two activities, especially if you haven't done this stuff before. But like I said, we'll go through it together. I'll help you out, and you can always ask me if you have questions. So that's all for the intro for this module. If anybody here has any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you all online Friday morning at 10, where we'll start looking at these documents in more detail. All right. Well, you know where to find me if you have any questions. So let me know. Otherwise, have a good week.